really have learned a lot from some of these like creative thinkers, the unstructured rules around creativity. So make something for you first, really focus on things that make you happy, then release it to the world, then let it become its own thing. Act now because this thing has only got a certain amount of potential in the moment. And don't get me wrong, some really nice things happened from those situations, like really beautiful moments that are unplanned. But I think the unplanned moments come without the planning. I do all these things which I call unpaid internships. I kind of naturally just want to make situations better. We benefit from a few things. We benefit from novelty. So a lot of the times we do things that people haven't done before, so that really grab a headline. And then over time, what we've done is we've just made these concepts repeatable over time. The one thing that I'm always focused on is it actually like the truth? I don't want to do things which are kind of unproven. I want to know kind of how the human body works and how it's going to react to certain situations. And I want to give you that experience. That's kind of unbeatable.
Welcome to the Financial Coconuts podcast, the business show. I am your occasional seasonal coconut. As contrary to what Reggie will always say, I am an occasional co-host. But today he's not here because as we record this today, it is the start of the Singapore FinTech Festival. He's out there expanding his empire while I'm here in this lovely studio with a lovely guest, Chris from Wildpost Studio. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Johnson. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm co-founder of Wildpost Studio. We started about 4 years ago as like a side project, and it became my main gig about 2 years ago. We focus on events, and I think our main mission is to help communities thrive. So we can deliver that through a range of means, whether that's events. We have our own line of drinks. We arrange events for other people. So we're doing quite a lot.
Yeah, so I was very curious about Wildpost Studio first and foremost because at first glance, it came across as a nightclub, basically. But then, as I dug deeper, it was more, the space wasn't that big. The studio itself was also doing a lot of outdoor events, like playing DJ music as people cycle along and run along the pathway. So it is a very different model. And that's why I think our listeners will be very interested to hear how you came up with this concept, because I think in Singapore it is not that. I think it's emerging. I think a lot of listeners here, including me, I'm a millennial, I'm not a Gen Z, right? But I'm not used to having a musical experience outside the four walls of a club. So today this is what we're going to talk about the studio. But before we go there, I want to understand, when do you come to Singapore? And what were you doing before all this?
I came to Singapore in 2012 and I had a corporate career here within executive search, particularly in the areas of like e-commerce, consumer tech, consulting, so hiring a lot of leaders in those spaces. I did that here for the best part of 11 years. And then 2 of those years were obviously during the pandemic. And that's when we set up the studio. And ultimately the studio was a mental health project. All of the venues that were closed down here. So it was a space for me and my friends to get together. Yeah, it was never supposed to be a business. It was supposed to be just a way for me and my friends to hang out with each other during a time of disconnection.
So it was during the pandemic. Therefore, there were, how many people could you squeeze into the studio back then?
Well,
legally speaking.
Well, I think the answer is 2, 5, or 8, depending on which time. And I don't have too many fond memories of that time. But the one memory I do have is that the day we got the keys to open the studio, the restrictions went from 5 people in the room to 2. So during this quite dark time when you couldn't really even see your friends or invite your neighbors over, my friend Andy and I were just painting this studio and having a great time, going shopping, getting materials, and just generally having something to look forward to, which was hosting our friends, bringing people into the space, making it cozy. So yeah, I think that was a kind of a great start for us and a kind of catalyst of our, some of our values and a part of our mission, which was, how do you turn bad situations into good? And how do you see the best in other people? It was a really good start.
Have you always been are you musically trained?
Because no, not at all. So I do have a fine art degree. I went to quite an academic school and I was around the age of like 17, 18. We had this really fantastic art teacher that basically gave me and 2 other friends like kind of permission to go against the grain of this, I don't know, going to Oxford or Cambridge or becoming, an XYZ profession. And she really saw in us the fact that we wanted to pursue the arts. And she just made these really fantastic predictions. She said to one of my friends, right, I think you're going to become something in music. I think you're going to do something in graphic design. And she said to me, like, I think you should just go and discover and like become an artist. So that's what we all did. And through those two friends, like I've learned a lot, whether it's DJing or how to build communities. So when it was time to do my own project, I took a lot of learnings from them and their journeys.
The location of your studio is...
Well, so the original studio was at Pearl's Hill, which is why we're called Wild Pearl. We like the word wild because it can be like wild and natural, or it can be like wild, like kind of ecstatic. So it has this kind of nice dual meaning. And we chose Pearl because we're at Pearl's Hill, and it sounded like a kind of fun dive bar, like a play on words of like a cheesy KTV. So we thought like being called the Pearl was quite funny.
It's still there, right?
No, so we closed that studio in February this year, and we are currently operating on a temporary basis out of the working capital. And by temporary, we open up the studio every Saturday. It's full-time, my office during the week, but it's a co-working space. So we are looking at trying to reestablish a full-time venue. But ultimately last year, it was the first year of us running the business. So it was me trying to run the business full-time, figure out our commercial model, do all these kind of legacy projects, which we really enjoyed, which is community radio, the bike events that you mentioned, these cold plunge parties we do in the morning. But ultimately this year is a much more commercially focused year where we're working with a lot of brands, build up our war chest so we can do more of the things that we liked doing last year, but in a more sustainable way.
Okay, just to get the timeline correct. So 2020, it started off as a mental health side project to not go crazy during lockdown, during the pandemic.
Yep.
And then up until last year, you started to think about the commercials of the business.
Yep.
And so that was the first the first 3 years you were doing it part-time, right?
Yeah, almost the first 2 years we were doing it part-time. And so that was every weekend we would be doing things like maybe a beach cleanup or with DJs, or a cycle ride with DJs, or activating someone's bar. So we did do a lot of paid projects, but they were very small, and they're not the kind of projects that would sustain a business, but they would allow us to buy some more cables or some more speakers or pay our team and things like that.
Yeah, you heard him mention just now, beach cleanup with DJ music. I think that's quite wild. Maybe because the idea of doing sustainability projects and stuff like that is, I don't know, I don't think it's meant to be serious, but I've never imagined that you could pair an outdoor DJ spinning while people were cleaning up dirty beaches. How do you identify these specific concepts to go into?
Yeah, so I think I spent some time in the US in 2019, like visiting friends. And I went to a big music festival, which is called Burning Man. And what I encountered there was just a lot of energy of like doing fun things, but doing them in a really kind of intentional and quite kind of extreme in a good way. So I was just the first time in a long time when I was like mid-30s. And there was a lot of people who were working these big tech companies or big consulting companies, but they're also putting all of their energy into building this camp or to upgrading this bus. There's some great stories of these people and the lengths they go to kind of make this experience great. So I was super inspired by that. And what I realized is that, fun wasn't like a frivolous thing or a luxury. And at the time in my corporate career, I was kind of, my career was progressing. The thing that I loved, which was electronic music, still very, very much here at night. And when my friends would come to play from overseas, I would go and see them. But I was just in this kind of moment in life where the two things which were really important to me, my career and progressing and making the most of my time in Singapore, and, having all these responsibilities that were increasing, really kind of clashing with this going out late at night, going to see friends or DJs. And I just thought that was really weird. So I wasn't enjoying going out at night anymore. And I wasn't really enjoying my career as much as I should be. So when I went to the US, I just had this real epiphany that you could do things, but you kind of need to renegotiate them. So I needed to kind of come back when I came back in late 2019 and just really think about like what I wanted from life and maybe some of the sacrifices I would need to make that happen. But the big message that came to me was, intentionally have fun. Intentionally create spaces for other people. And, I just have always loved hosting. I've always loved all the kind of tech behind the scenes. So speakers and, I always liked putting these experiences together. So that's where we started. So I think that just being a bit curious but also having these like high standards around how to do stuff That's where we started. For me, it was fun became a really serious thing. And then over the last 3-4 years, I've realized that fun equals dopamine. Dopamine equals neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity equals learning. So actually, it's a really important part of personal development. It's a really important part of like bringing people together. And it's kind of core to our mission. So how I think about things now is like, how do you make it fun? How do you make things fun so people actually want to lean into it and come? One of the things I know the best is music. So I had to program music for different times, program music for different times of day. But really, the one lesson I learned from music is that music brings people together. As cliche as it is, it's a universal language. Music communities are typically some of the best communities to learn from in terms of like self-organizing, cohesion, people taking care of each other, not really having any rules, but ultimately everyone is included. I think that for me, like music communities I learn a lot from.
It sounds like, because when I asked the question about how you came up with the concept, I was mentally categorizing you as a founder as somebody who would sit down at a table and said, okay, I'm going to set up this business. This studio is getting serious. I have a lot of people coming and enjoying the experience I provide. And this is the next 6 to 12 month plan that I would want it to evolve into. And therefore, one of the plan is to spin at a beach cleanup. And the next plan, 3 months later, 6 months later, is going to be, I'm going to work with a cold plunge partner and then spin music on the rooftop bar. But it doesn't sound like that, right?
No, I think a lot of these things are done from a gut feel. Like I really have learned a lot from some of these like creative thinkers. Let's say people like Rick Rubin. Really, the thing I love about him is kind of talking about the unstructured rules around creativity. So make something for you first, really focus on things that make you happy, then release it to the world, then let it become its own thing, and then go and do the next creative act. Act now, because this thing has only got a certain amount of potential in the moment. So those are things that I've really enjoyed giving myself permission to go and pursue. And so a lot of this stuff is done on gut feel. I'm our first customer. I will do things that meet my standards, that make me happy. And then somehow along the way, I find people who come along for the ride and tell me like, oh, this is great. Or like, how would we do this? And a lot of the things I will say yes to are, like sometimes it's novelty. Sometimes it's things that I haven't thought of, which make total sense. Sometimes it's opportunities that come along. So I would say that the catalyst is really like a really authentic thing for me to make me happy. And then I think that there's some kind of human wiring that we are all drawn to people who are doing the things that they love. So like when you see a performer or when you see someone doing something that they love, then it's more interesting to see. And don't get me wrong, some really nice things happened from those situations, are really beautiful moments that are unplanned. But I think the unplanned moments come without the planning.
So none of those playbooks of, before you launch something, you need to do market sizing. You need to find out how many people your solution or your product is going to reach. None of those things. You were just rolling along and figuring out at the same time.
Yeah, the market analysis is me. And also it's more like I see these things, like let's say it's on Instagram or something. I'm like, that's really cool. So we just did a floating sound bath at QT Hotel, but someone sent me a floating sound bath like image like last year.
Really?
And for anyone...
For those who don't know, I don't know.
Yeah.
What is a floating sound bath?
Oh, so obviously, I hope people are familiar with the idea of a sound bath, which is sometimes you go into like a room and you lie down, maybe you've got something over your eyes and someone will play singing bowls or a gong. And the physical experience of like the sound waves is supposed to relax you. The one that I saw last year was they did this, they put all of these kind of instruments, whether it's the bowls or the gong, alongside a swimming pool. And then they had people lying on these kind of inflatable camp beds with a cloth over their body and then eye masks. So you had the sensation of floating. So it's a little bit like a sensory deprivation tank.
Okay.
And so the idea of a floating sound bath is you have the sensation of like moving and weightlessness. At the same time, the sound waves can go through the water and kind of under your body. So it's supposed to be even more relaxing or have more of an effect on your body because we're also made mostly of water. So like this whole thing is supposed to kind of give you like a really good experience. So I just looked at it and I was like, this looks really cool. So we try to find different situations to do it in. We've just did our first one during F1 weekend with a lady called Make One. And we're now going to expand that concept. I figured it out. We made a lot of mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but we we're figuring it out as we go about how to set up the speakers, how to set up the environment to make it a really great experience. So the things that I care about are not how does the flyer look, but what does it do for that person? Does it actually give them the feeling that they want? Does it actually make them feel good? And if you ask anything about business metrics, the only business metrics I care about is would that person come back and would they tell a friend and bring a friend? Because that's how I know I'm growing my business or the thing's not working.
So retention.
Well, it's still growth and retention.
Because I'm in marketing, I'm very interested in retention matrix and word of mouth, all these things, because especially for community growth and word of mouth, these are very hard to reach kind of outcomes for marketing people, because it's something that you cannot advertise your way to, because it's very tied to the product and the experience itself, right? And then in the e-commerce world, where I was from, in the B2C world, there's this measurement of how many times you need to expose a person to the same thing, maybe 5 times, maybe 7 times before they start to come back. So for in your case, in this experiential industry, I would say, how many times do you start to see people coming back?
So I'm familiar with this. So I used to do a lot of hiring for media agencies. So I'm kind of familiar with attribution modeling. I think when we're still small and still the audience we have is still quite small. So I think that we benefit from a few things. We benefit from novelty. So a lot of the times we do things that people haven't done before. So that really grab a headline. And also if I'm trying to do stuff for me, then people, I think, have this understanding these days that we're going to do something which we really believe in. So I think this kind of quality and the novelty are a good interplay, I think. So, and then over time, what we've done is we've just made these concepts repeatable over time. So when we were doing these 6:30 a.m. cold plunge parties at Potato Head, but when you suddenly see on your feed that all your friends have been to a party and woken up at 5:30 a.m. and everyone's drinking coffee at Potato Head and doing cold plunges, and they're all talking about how their dopamine levels are so high, and then they're just at their desk and they've done a month's worth of work in that morning because all their anxiety is gone, then I think that really hits. So it's really truthful. So the things, I guess the one thing that I'm always focused on is it actually like the truth? Does a cold plunge actually spike your dopamine? I don't want to do things which are kind of unproven. I want to know kind of how the human body works and how it's going to react to certain situations. And I want to give you that experience. So those are things I focus on. So I know that when someone does a cold plunge, they're going to spike the dopamine. I know it's going to make them happy. I know it's going to remove anxiety. And I know it's really good for giving them energy later on in the day. So that's kind of unbeatable. So I think for that reason, I don't have to do a lot of marketing, but I do have to focus on the engineering side, which is how do you get all the cold plunges there? How do you get all the water clean and filtered? What kind of coffee do you provide? And we want to have a very specific type of coffee. What breakfast do you have? Like why at that time of day? Because it's in line with your circadian rhythms. So all your cells have a clock. It's good for you to be outside in sunlight. It's scientifically proven for you to be better with other people. We play house music because house music makes you feel better. So all these things I just know tick, 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 tick in the background that environment is default good for a human to stand in. But when you just turn up, you think it's a party. But guess what? There's no fried food. There's no like screamingly loud music. There's no one doing shots of tequila. And those things might degrade your health or degrade your experience at that time of day. So I think the things that we do, a lot of work engineering the environment. So you feel that it's effortless, but actually that environment kind of carries you and everyone around you to have a better time.
It feels like you started off with music, and then right now you have just evolved into this whole wellness, well-being kind of slant, where music is still a bedrock of the experiences that you deliver, but the focus is not solely on music. But I'm very curious, like, so actually, how many people actually turn up? Because maybe for the past few years, we have seen all these, 3 p.m. brunch clubbing kind of thing where people show up and then drink coffee and no alcohol.